Okay, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have a really cool review for you from another channel favorite, the brand Seiko. And I have to say, this is probably one of my favorite releases of the year from them. I think that they're really doing outstanding in some of the kind of more high range Seikos that they're doing, more I'd say mid-tier style. But I think that as far as like entry-level Seikos go, this and then of course the Digituna, which I recently reviewed, are kind of at the top of my list. I think they really hit the nail on the head with this one, and surprisingly I don't think this watch has gotten enough attention yet. So I did want to kind of bring it in and share it with you guys, share my thoughts, and also, as you can see, I'm comparing two of my favorite Seiko mods of a similar theme, one being kind of my ode to the original 6105 Turtle, and then also my idea of what a modern SKX would be, kind of, which I feel like this new Mini-Turtle is kind of the best of both worlds. It took kind of my Prospects SKX idea and blended it into a Seiko, the really that turtle barrel shaped case, that cushion shape. I think really takes it to another level and even distills it even more into something that's instantly recognizable as a Seiko watch. So a little bit about the brand. Of course, Seiko was founded back in 1881. They are Japanese in origin and now have factories throughout Asia. They cover all market segments from entry level to high end, which is a very unique feature about the Seiko brand and something that I definitely can appreciate. This particular type of watch, if you couldn't tell, is a dive watch. Some key common characteristics and design language you're going to look for when checking out a dive watch is you're going to want something, of course, that's water resistant, normally through some type of screw down crown, something that's tough, legible, with a dive time bezel and a diver's extension if it is on bracelet. Now, this particular model is the SRPC35J1 Mini-Turtle. So this is a J model, so it does have the made in Japan on the dial, which is a nice little nod for collectors. And I was able to get this through Nauman Watches for 380 bucks. So it's definitely a good deal. So I recommend them because, it's one of those things where when it comes to unfortunately, some pet peeves about Seikos. There's the chapter ring alignment and all that, and normally I would say that the J models are the safer bet. Of course, it's not 100% rule, but normally when they're finished in Japan versus in some of their other factories, it seems like the QC is a bit better. So let's go ahead and get this piece in hand. Okay, actually before I pick these up, I did want to mention the scale of the watch. As you can see, it is the Mini Tuna. It is Mini Turtle, and it is a bit smaller than the Turtle reissue. And then it's about, I'd say pretty close in size to the SKX, which is a great size. I think many people found that watch super wearable. But because of the super short lug to lug length, it actually wears even more compactly, and then also it has even a thinner lug width as well, so the bracelet itself is going to be a little bit thinner as well. So that's just something I did want to mention. So let's go ahead and pick this piece up and take a closer look. So the specs did flash across the screen there in the beginning of the video, but this is a 42.3 millimeter diameter with a 13 millimeter height and a 42.5 millimeter lug to lug, which is actually pretty outstanding considering, look at how short those lugs are. The lug to lug length is actually thinner than many other divers that are out there. So that's pretty crazy that they were able to have such a small lug to lug length, and you'll see why that helps this watch wear so great on wrist, almost for some standards even too small. So But I mean, for me, I think it makes it a lot more comfortable and even more wearable at this particular size. Now, some specs, as you can tell, this is a fully stainless steel model, all brushed with a couple of polished little details there. And then you have the flat mineral hardlex with a magnification cyclops there over the date, which is very nice. The movement inside, although you cannot see it, is actually of course, the Seiko 4R35, 35 meaning date only, a 36 would be the day date model. This is hacking and hand windable, which is really nice and great to see in a modern diver. The case back, as you saw, pretty standard affair, solid and stamped with some etching as far as the details go. As you can see there. Actually, let me open the clasp. You might get a better look there. So, really nicely done. Now, as far as the dial goes, you're going to be getting, all the nice modern touches. It's going to be applied indices, as you can see. Very nice, very thick Lumibrite lume applied there. You're going to have the matte black dial. Date's going to be right there at the 3 o'clock, really nicely with the Cyclops magnifier there. It's something I don't really look for in a watch, but I think the way they did the kind of more water droplet style magnifier, how it's just a perfect circle there, it does tie in really nicely to the general shape and theme of the particular watch, which I do like quite a bit. Now, the hands are actually, as you can see, the seconds hand is actually polished, but the minute and the hour hand are actually brushed, which is a really nice feature because it actually helps keep the contrast really nice. Because it's only going to kind of light up in reflection, and it's never going to really reflect back some of the darker tones. I mean, it might be showing up that way because of kind of my studio setup here. Everything's kind of pitch black inside this room except for the studio lights, but I assure you that it does add a really nice dimension as far as legibility goes when you are outdoors. Now, this, of course, is 200 meters water resistant, and of course that means it meets or exceeds the ISO standards. To carry that text, you actually can't just put the diver's 200 meters text on any watch. It actually does have to be ISO certified. That's why a lot of times you'll see watches that are would just say their depth rating. It doesn't necessarily say divers on it, so that's really nice. One thing I forgot to mention is it does have a 120 click unidirectional bezel there. There's not really any play in it. At least, nothing more than you'd expect from this type of bezel action from a Seiko. Really nicely done. I do like the grips. I think it's very easy to grip as well. As you can see, the scallops on there are really quite nice. The crown is screw down and unsigned. The interesting thing is that they actually put it at the 3 o'clock versus kind of the traditional 4 o'clock, which I think is almost a sign that Seiko has been listening to their fans, and I think that there are quite a few people that really did like the Seiko SKX, but they didn't really like the 4 o'clock crown placement. They want something a little bit more traditional, and I feel like Seiko, this is kind of their swing at a one watch. They normally don't do that. I don't find that their designs are normally for a one watch. I feel like they always want to, every watch they put out is one of a collection of many. It feels like they don't really try to do one watch that can kind of do everything. They really make them kind of a bit polarizing and specific. But I feel like this is kind of their, especially in the entry level range, this is the closest thing. It's not oversized. It's very modestly sized. Even at just the specs, at 42.3 millimeters, but it also has a lot of those Seiko tricks that make it wear much smaller. So this is going to wear a lot more like a 40 or even a 38 on some wrists. So I think this is it's a really cool step. I almost would think of this as like a Seiko's, you know, Submariner. I mean, obviously it looks nothing like a Submariner, but it fits that kind of black and steel architecture, and it's really the type of watch that is just so versatile. And you know, there's other watches that are out there that people have kind of used as everyday watches. You know, the Sumo, which this actually has a very similar bracelet. You know, the SKX, the Turtle. I mean, those are watches kind of a lot of people wear as everyday watches. But I think this kind of is a more modern take and almost even a more distilled Seiko look. I mean, with the really short lugs, it even has almost like a tuna-like profile, which is really nice. So it almost feels like it is, you know, it kind of reminds me of those pieces, those design pieces where people will do it like for an anniversary, and it kind of is all encompassing but also looking forward. I feel like this watch is kind of like that, and in that way, and I think it's really has what it takes to be a future classic. So very quickly, I do want to just do some comparisons here, as you can see, to the Turtle reissue. This is a mod. I have the full video review on in the channel there, so make sure you check that out if you have any questions about this particular model. But as you can see, as far as size goes, you know, it doesn't seem like that much of a difference when you kind of look at it, but when it's on your wrist, it makes quite a bit of a difference. So let me actually tuck that back and see if that helps at all. But I mean, you can just really see that the dial size alone is really just at such a different scale. This is a much smaller dial here, and then even the chapter ring is at a harsher angle versus here, which it's more at a flatter angle, which really expands the dial and makes the watch feel really quite big. But the chapter ring does help kind of shrink things down in general. So there are still some tricks that help this watch wear a little bit more modestly than its, you know, 44 millimeter dimensions go. But as you can see from the side there, really nice. You got the drilled lugs still carrying over, really nicely done. And then you know, pretty standard fare on the back. But I did want to see, you know, to kind of show you, of course I don't have a real 6105, but that DNA is there as far as, you know, the turtle silhouette and really just the general design language. I feel like it really does have a nice fit to it. And of course, I do like that it is a little bit more modern and different in that they know that they shrunk the dial down quite a bit. So they, you know, they decided to forego the day function and just have it kind of with the date there, which I think looks absolutely great. So another quick comparison here would be to my SKX mod, which is kind of my modern take on the SKX. And if I was working at Seiko, what I kind of would have had them do to this particular model to be, you know, an updated Seiko SKX. And I think that, like, you know, Seiko really could have taken the easy road and just threw a hacking and hand-windable movement in and used a couple of things from their part spin and really made a modern SKX. But I think I feel like this is their modern SKX, you know, in a lot of ways, because the SKX is, of course, part originally, you know, it kind of relieved the Turtle for a while it was discontinued and there weren't any new Turtle models. This was kind of the new shape of Seiko kind of moving forward, and then it went away, and then the Turtle kind of came back. So I feel it was a bit of a changing of the guard, but because of the specs and the wearability of this piece, it really does remind me a lot of the SKX, especially on wrist. It actually wears a bit nicer than the SKX because of that really short lug width. And of course, you know, if you have a larger wrist, you don't really have to worry about that. But I think it's one of those things where they've just done so much. And it's funny because a lot of my kind of predictions, you know, like the scalloped, look at it, it has like the same scallop type of bezel. The dials are very similar. The hand layout, of course, although I did go for signed crown, of course, sapphire and ceramic insert and all that good stuff, Marine Master clasp. So there are some upgrades that kind of make this more upstream. if Seiko was to produce this. But I think what you have right here is something that just is such a smart move by Seiko, and just really well executed. And I mean, one of the things people love in design is something that's symmetrical, and then this is one of the more symmetrical Seikos that's ever been produced. So I'm really excited about this piece, and let's go ahead and get it on wrist. So as you can see, it wears just about perfectly on my 7¼ inch wrist there. The really short lugs really keep it centered, especially when it's out a bit further, and you can get a better perspective on my wrist. But up close, normally where these watches would look absolutely huge, because of the short lug width, even though there is that kind of lens distortion there that when you're taking kind of a wrist shot deal, it still is actually really quite wearable. I mean, of course it wears nicely, but visually the presence, I think, is still really well balanced. So really nicely done. And of course, as you can see, those that nice shape there where the bottom of the watch is actually quite small. So the footprint is really nice on the wrist, and it gives you a lot of mobility. I do like to wear my watches a bit lower on the wrist than probably the more traditional wears, but I also wear the watch on my right wrist. I'm left-handed. So it's one of those things that is kind of, a little bit unique about my channel, is that I do wear the watches on this wrist versus very traditional on the left hand. But with that said, I mean, obviously it shouldn't carry over too much, but I do like to wear it a bit looser, so it's nice. I can really appreciate when a watch has a really great shape that's very ergonomic, because of course, when I wear it a little bit looser, it's going to hang a little bit lower on the wrist, which means it's going to come into more contact with my hand when I am rotating my wrist. So, but I mean, I think this thing just wears absolutely like a gem. A couple more brief comments and details on the bracelet. Of course, does have 20mm lugs, which is really nice, and something that is a different step for Seiko, because most of their divers are all 22mm width. So that means this is still going to be an absolute dream on a rubber strap or on a NATO, which is really nice change, because honestly a 22mm NATO in most cases is going to feel a bit thick. So I think it's really awesome that they have that 20mm lug width, and it looks right. It's not like when there was a 20mm lug width on the Sumo, where it just makes, because of how wide the Sumo looks and wears, I mean, it looks giant with this really skinny bracelet. So I think it's really nice that there's more of a balanced look here. As you can see, it just feels more proportional, and I feel it just has a more cohesive design and flow to it, and I'm really appreciating that right now. So as far as the connections, this has a pin and double collar connecting system similar to what you'd find in the Turtle reissue. This of course is all brushed. It does have solid end links with those nice polished details, and it does have a clasp with a little diver's extension, and then it is of course all stamped, and then it starts at 20mm and tapers down to 18, but I definitely appreciate the 18mm taper. Again, that's something that really adds to the wearability. And then also, if I ever wanted to, of course, I could switch this out and put a Marine Master clasp on there if I really wanted to. Normally, though, it would have to have an aftermarket bracelet option, which I wouldn't see. I'm really surprised that there isn't one out yet. I'm sure there will be eventually, and really because of the shape, you can even put probably a straight end link bracelet in there, and it would look absolutely just fine. So let's go ahead and get a lume shot. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights. As you can see, the lume is absolutely pumping away there. Really bright. I gotta say, this is definitely one of the brighter Seiko divers that I've ever seen. It has to do, of course, it is the more modern lume bright mix, but also it is so thickly applied. I mean, those indices are really just jam-packed. So, that's something that I really like. And of course, Seiko makes great lume, so when you find a watch that really just kind of blasts and pumps like that, it's just pretty awesome. So one of the things I like to do on the channel is actually do a nice low light transition shot here, so you can see kind of what this piece is going to look like, and not just, you know, outdoor direct sunlight settings. It gives you a nice idea of kind of some of those textures that get washed out when you know, I'm recording under these very hot studio lights here. So as you can see, the brushing is nice and uniform. That matte dial has a great texture to it, very fine, satiny, that really, as you can see, that if I stop right here, you see how the dial and the bezel insert really just they just match. It's really nice there. And then that black is a deep black. You know, it looks a little bit more washed out when you, of course, are at certain angles because of the matte finish, and then, you know, under the studio lights. But as you can see here, you see how dark that is. You know, it's just really, it's really nice, and it's a deep black, and it's nice and inky, which is great. So, you know, in practice and in practical use, you're gonna see this really as a nice classic black and steel timepiece. And again, that kind of ties back to, this is almost like Seiko's, you know, Submariner. And let's be honest, the Submariner's roots are of a tool watch, and it's something that, you know, it has been a bit lost in translation over the years of refinement and all the reiterations. It's become more of a luxury timepiece. Even the case is even the same for a lot of the Seiko divers. I mean, the Grand Seikos, the Spring Drive, Tunas, they're just more high-end, more luxurious pieces. But the thing that I really enjoy about this Mini-Turtle is that it really still ties into that original idea of an affordable watch. I mean, this is under $400, and they're probably only going to get cheaper. And this particular one is the J model. So, I mean, if you want to get the K model, that's going to be a little less prestigious. I mean, by all means, go for it. And you're going to have a real, something that can hold its own. It doesn't, you know, the great thing is that I can see it as a, you know, as a Submariner alternative, not as a homage by any means. This is pure Seiko. Everything about it, every design element on it just screams Seiko, and it really just shows the modern prowess of the brand and what they're able to do. But it has those little key things. You know, it does have the Cyclops, it has the very symmetrical dial, you know, symmetrical shape. Everything is just super clean, very sterile, and just, which makes it very timeless and versatile. So that's one of the things that I just really enjoy about this piece. I know it's going to sound weird to compare it to the Sub. The Sub is, you know, super expensive in comparison, but I mean more so the spirit of it, and that the Submariner can be many people's one watch. You can dress it up, you can dress it down. It's versatile, but it's tough. So it has the chops to be dressed down, and can be, you know, taken out, and you can get down and dirty with it. That's the same thing with this piece right here. It's an in-house automatic movement, hacking, hand windable. You know, it gives you the very simple features of, you know, time plus the date, and it's infinitely user friendly. And when you look at it, you can just tell that it's purpose built. And again, it has its own design language and its own DNA, that it's built up since this lineage since back in 1881. You know, I feel like all the Seikos that came before this, so many of the more popular ones played a part in kind of the development of this piece. So I was really surprised, and honestly, when I first heard about the Mini-Turtles, it didn't really catch my eye. It wasn't something that I was too excited about, but, you know, experiencing them in person, the more I saw them, they just really started to grow on me, and I just kind of could appreciate these little things that I normally look for in other watches, not in Seikos, because I honestly just don't expect that from Seiko. You know, I always expect these really quirky divers that just have this personality, that just have, you know, they always have one or two, and it's the reason why Seiko mods are so popular. There's always those 2 or 3 little things that you want to change about the watch. You know, the SKX, you want to have applied indices, you want to, you know, there's just things you want to put a better bracelet on it. So there's so many of those little things, doing hand swaps on the turtle and whatnot. So there's always those little things that you want to change about those watches. And for me, this watch, as it sits right now, is just absolutely perfect. It doesn't need, I mean, it would be nice to have a sapphire, but it wouldn't have that little, you know, teardrop cyclops, which I think that magnifier is something that really adds to the character of the watch. And you know, it's something that really impresses me. Could the bracelet be better? Yes, a lot of the things could be better. This is by no means a baby grand Seiko or even a, you know, Marine Master quality type of watch. But what it is a tool watch, and it's completely unapologetic about that. You know, it's something that you can grab and go, and you can rely on it and depend on it, and it's going to be there, and it can go anywhere, especially in this color format with the black and steel, such a classic color. So without rambling on too much, I guess I should hit up some closing thoughts. On the wrist, again, it really wears more like a 38 or a 40. You know, the specs are quite deceiving, as they normally are with Seiko watches. Just a reminder, that lug width, that lug to lug, sorry, is only 42.5 millimeters, which is so short. I mean, they're literally, I mean, it's lug to lug is shorter than the actual width of the turtle reissue. So I mean, that's nuts. So its big brother is literally wider than this thing is even long. So if that gives you kind of any idea of the compact nature and feel of this piece, you know, that's something that hopefully I can kind of convey through the video. It's definitely tough without getting it on wrist. And so the nice thing about this is that it really adds a more modern feel than the turtle reissue, but it still maintains many of those iconic Seiko design cues from so many classic models of the past. You know, it's really just one of the most balanced and symmetrical designs, and the really closest thing to an affordable quote-unquote one watch offering since the SKX. So since the SKX 007, there really hasn't been anything from Seiko that I feel had the capability to be a one watch. I mean, there's a lot of great divers that Seiko has out there, but I mean, they can be very polarizing. Even the turtle is a bit big, which is nice that they made a smaller one, because although the turtle does have very classic lines and looks, it's a little bit large. So not everybody can support a watch of that size, even when it's gonna wear a little bit smaller. So really an awesome piece. Some model variants. There's this, of course, is the black and white. There's also a blue and white model, and then a patty option, which is a Pepsi variant. So those are all really cool. I'd say comparable models. I'm gonna go with the Orient Mako 2 and the Ray 2. I think those are very comparable. Hacking, hand winding, you know, the whole 9 yards. Even now with their 41 millimeter case size versus this one with the 42.3, I think they are definitely very comparable. If maybe you thought the SKX was a bit too big, or you thought that the turtle was too big, so you kind of have been buying Orient Makos or Rays instead, I think this could be the thing that brings you back to Seiko. It really, to me, is that good. And I really enjoy the Mako and the Ray, especially the newer models that have the updated movements. I love those watches. I think this really is one, I'd say that when you compare them, it's a clear winner. Before there's a couple of trade-offs and whatnot. Of course, the Orients are going to be a lot cheaper, but for me, the trade-offs, everything considered, I think this is more of a clear-cut winner of what is a quote-unquote better watch between the two. Not necessarily what's better for you and what you want, but I think objectively this is, you know, a better timepiece. So the bottom line is, you know, this has all of Seiko's in-house qualities and a modern package that delivers a lot of value for the money, which is really, again, at the end of the day, what Seiko has always been all about. It's really that bang per buck. So they just offer so much to you in such an awesome package. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked the video, please do hit like. And if you haven't already, please don't forget to subscribe. And, you know, stay tuned for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.